Hi everyone, thanks for clicking. We know we've discussed bikes and motorcycles and their exposures before, but I would like to bring them together with some of our previous videos. In particular, a bike that I've recently discovered an affinity, nay, an obsession with. I am talking about EV bikes, electric bikes, and motorcycles. With Tesla leading the way with electric vehicles, new charging stations being put in every day, of course, pleasure vehicles want to take up the call for greener emissions. There was one thing I want everyone to be made aware of though, mag fields. Let's start with the Zero. This new streamlined design of the Zero allows for the battery to be kept at the bottom. This allows for the largest weight to be centered at the bottom, making for a smoother, easier ride. The software is unique and does so much that it makes riding almost unconscious. But then there's one thing that is actually on the downside for this. The harness components that produce the most mag fields and its safest place to be kept happens to be directly beneath the seat. The harness produces a massive pulse in the mag fields, sporadically as far as we could tell, and the silence of the bike makes for an increased risk of it being on and pulsing unbeknownst to the rider. The levels usually stay somewhat low, between 1 and 2, but they can get up quite high, nearly 30 milligauss. Also, it's pretty high for being right between your legs, you know? An example of this for scientific review would be a paper entitled Scoping Review of the Potential Health Effects of Exposure to Extremely Low Frequency Electric and Magnetic Fields by Habash. I'll put the citation below. It's about previous studies suggest that extremely low ELF, electric and magnetic fields, EMFs, may impact human health. However, epidemiological studies have provided inconsistent results on the association between exposure to ELF, EMFs, and various health outcomes. Their scoping review reports on primary investigations that were published during a 10-year period from 2007 to 2017 on the association between ELF, EMFs, and cancer, cardiovascular disease, reproductive health issues, and neurodegenerative diseases. They found 361 articles from 2 biological databases, so that'd be PubMed and EMBase. Of those, 39 articles, so 19 cancer, 2 CVD, 9 reproductive health, and 10 neurodegenerative disease studies, with 1 repeated for 2 outcomes, met the inclusion criteria for their review. The articles identified were on 3 different types of exposure. So occupational, 22 studies, residential, 15, and an electric blanket, there was 2 studies done. Their review suggests that ELF EMFs may be associated with neurodegenerative diseases, specifically Alzheimer's. Yay. However, limited evidence was found to suggest that ELF EMFs are associated with several types of cancer, CVD, and reproductive outcomes. So additional epidemiological studies in large study populations with improved exposure assessments are needed to clarify current inconclusive relationships. So they found a bunch of studies that found results, but the exposure criteria might not match reproducible scientific criteria for actual studies. And overall, when you observe all of the papers individually, or when you observe all of the papers together, you find that you end up with an inconsistent result. So the next bike we tried was the Harley LiveWire. Now, this is actually my first time riding a Harley. I have previously seen the design for this online and thought it would be a terrible ride. The battery sits up much higher than on the Zero, and there is a design issue that was made for aesthetic reasons that engineers that I've spoken to have shown a little bit of disdain for. They mounted the motor from the front to back, leading to a 90-degree angle for the main gear, which can lead to a reduced battery efficiency that burns off about 5 to 10% of the energy entirely for aesthetics, which for an EV, you kind of want that mileage and efficiency because that's pretty much the main thing taking things away from going for an EV bike for most riders and drivers as well. But as a piece of tech, it has a lot more options than the Zero, and it has a lot of different cool buttons. But as far as modes go, it still has all the same ones: Eco, Sports, and Rain, all that kind of cool stuff. And it should be incredible based on the fact that it's just nearly twice the price of the Zero for the basic model. They both have Bluetooth connections, which we've done discussions on and reviewed, and you have to be careful with, just to warn you. But the riding was not only incredibly pleasant, but a complete surprise. It does have a higher weight distribution and it is a much heavier bike in general, but once you're moving, you don't notice any of that. It's a smooth ride, same type of torque though, like immediate torque, because it is an EV, and it's a ton of fun. That is not the most interesting part of it though. There are nearly no mag fields of emissions, so we don't know if this was on purpose due to the engineers being aware of this being a possible health issue, or if it's a direct result of searching for efficiency. Likely the latter. Now to get into the more technical reason behind this, because there is a reason for it. It has to do with the wiring of the harness. So electromagnetic compatibility is what the manufacturers need to do in order to keep their products running smoothly and by keeping the electrical equipment and systems functioning acceptably in their environment. Failure to do so can lead to a propagation and reception of electromagnetic energy, which may cause unwanted effects like electromagnetic interference or physical damage of the operational equipment. So it blows itself up or catches on fire by itself. Okay, so EMC, or electromagnetic compatibility, pursues three main classes of issue. Emission is the generation of electromagnetic energy, whether deliberate or accidental, by some source, and its release into the environment. EMC studies the unwanted emissions and the countermeasures which may be taken in order to reduce the unwanted emission. The second class, susceptibility, is the tendency of electrical equipment, referred to as the victim, to malfunction or break down in the presence of unwanted emissions, which are known as radio frequency interference, or RFI. Immunity is the opposite of susceptibility, being the ability of the equipment to function correctly in the presence of RFI, with the discipline of hardening the equipment being known equally as susceptibility or immunity. A third class studied is coupling, which is the mechanism by which emitted interference reaches the victim. So interference mitigation and hence electromagnetic compatibility may be achieved by addressing any or all three of these issues. So such as quieting the sources of interference, inhibiting coupling paths, and or hardening the potential victims. In practice, many of the engineering techniques used, such as grounding and shielding, apply to all three of these issues. So the loop area is defined as the area encompassing the associated wiring for the system or any component of the system. So in an electrical system, a ground loop or earth loop occurs when 2 points of a circuit are intended to have the same ground reference potential, but instead have different potential between them. So this can be caused, for example, by a signal circuit reference to ground, if enough current is flowing in the ground to cause 2 points to be at different potentials. The ground loops are a major cause of noise, hum, and interference in audio, video, and computer systems. Wiring practices to protect against ground loops include ensuring that all vulnerable signal circuits are referenced to one point as ground. Differential signaling can be used to reject ground-induced interference. Removal of safety ground connections to equipment can eliminate the ground loop currents, but also eliminates the protection to safety ground connection as it was intended to provide. Oh, you can use a time domain reflectometer or detector to measure the characteristics of the electrical lines. It looks for faults in the metallic cables, like twisted pair wire or coaxial cables, and discontinuities in the connector, circuit board, or any other electrical path. So some examples of this for real life application would be a particular patents that we've seen. So Vortex patent, drone patent. By constructing the frame of the UAV fuselage from PCB material, the overall weight of the UAV is reduced by replacing copper wires and other conductive wires with the conductive tracks of the PCB material. In some implementations, the conductive tracks of the PCB material from which the frame is made may have identical or nearly identical geometry, be stacked directly on top of each other, and or have minimal separation there between. So the separation by an insulating layer and a substrate material. In this way, by using the conductive tracks in lieu of conductive wires, a magnetic field normally generated while electrical current is being drawn from the power source by a conductively connected electrical component may be reduced. So your drone is lighter and more efficient and not as likely to burn itself out. Another thing you can actually do, so there's another patent, it's for batteries. So in this figure 4 illustrates an example of the implementation of a battery pack with reduced magnetic field emissions, similar to the battery packs discussed above, but the electrical cells are positioned in a coaxial configuration. So in this coaxial configuration, the supply path is through the center of the electrochemical cell, and the return path is through the conductive sleeve positioned about each electrical chemical cell. to the negative terminal of the first electrochemical cell. So the supply path and the return path are as close as physically possible, and therefore minimize the magnetic field generated between the conductors. So the coaxial return path of the battery pack may result in very small stray magnetic fields being generated. This allows for readily available cylindrical steel cell electrochemical cells, so AA batteries or 18650 batteries, etc., to be used with magnetically sensitive devices, so a magnometer or a compass, electric compass, in place of more expensive pouch cells that are less safe and obviously more expensive. So because of the reduced magnetic fields emissions produced by these battery packs, you can also use them for electrical devices that are configured to be powered by cylindrical steel electrochemical cells that might be sensitive. So some examples of these would be remotely piloted vehicles and unmanned aerial systems / drones and electrical cars. So that's pretty cool. So in the EV battery, the current flows from the negative to the positive and can create a nodal path. So phase lines can be easily good or bad depending on their geometry, and pouch cells are actually much better at this, but the cylindrical cells, than cylindrical cells for stray emissions, they are just more dangerous and more expensive due to their fragility. Okay, so you may have noticed that we used the tri-field meter for this video. Great meter, by the way, for magnetic fields. Really enjoy it. Just wanted to give you a little hint that there is a possibility that SLT might be producing their own, so keep an eye out for that. So thank you very much for watching. Take care and stay safe out there, and don't forget to subscribe and check us out on BitChute and LiveWire, and leave some comments below because that's how we learn and grow. Thank you.